Finishing our series on legacy, so I've really enjoyed doing this series. I really have. It's a lot of stuff that we've gotten from Abraham. Just a whole lot of things that we've been able to glean. It was really a long series, but I don't think that I kind of designed the series to where you really didn't feel like you were going verse by verse. It actually did kind of have some variety in it. But I wanted us to see the whole key was the legacy that he left behind. Abraham's one of my favorite characters in the Bible. I don't mean any disrespect to old Abraham. But it really goes to show you that faith wins the war every time. You know, it really is the victory that overcomes the world. Abraham was a perfect example of that. You know, it's actually, in God's economy, it's actually a compliment if the only thing you have is faith. If you don't have ability, you don't have strength. You know, I love the song, You're Never Too Old to Pray. It's just a real simple song that was written by a country fella. I'm not sure if it was the Rochesters or who, but the song goes, "I'm never too old to pray." And you know, we might lose our strength. Brother Arscott was talking about how that, you know, when we're young, we feel like we can, you know, we depend on ourselves a whole lot, but when we get older, we start realizing how much we need the Lord. You know, prayer really fits into that. Jonathan brought up the fact that we're very inventive like God, where He made us in His image. And when it comes to prayer, we're also like God because we depend on Him. And if you look at the Trinity, they depend on one another. And that was just really enlightening for me. But we're about to jump into some new studies as we also are drawing towards the end of Worth It. So be looking forward to our study in 1 Peter. I don't know if you've got that. Do you have that slide, Wilson? You don't have that? Okay. I thought that I had put it in the slide list, and I don't think I did because it wasn't in the Switcher program. But it's called Unshaken. That's the title of the new series. And it's basically finding stability in an unstable world. We really need to find that stability. I heard that Wilson had taught the young kids about the wise man who built his house upon the rock and the foolish man who built his house upon the sand. As a matter of fact, Connor was the one who told me about that. He was really paying attention in class. I was so glad to hear that. But if you think about it, I was asking Maurice, I said, if somebody built something on a faulty foundation, about how long do you think it would last? He said, well, depending on the weather, it could last up to 2 years. Something to think about. You know, you say, I'm going to build on this without God, and you know, everything's going to be fine. And 2 years might go by and you're doing pretty good, but boy, when the weather changes, that's when you wish you'd built on a stronger foundation. Then I got another one, and I just couldn't think of another design for it, and I like I said, I forgot to put it up here, but the title is Stubborn Love. When God refuses to let you go. The title is very peculiar. The picture, it's a cowboy riding a bull, and really, if you're familiar with the story of Jacob, you might understand that picture. If you're not familiar with the story, you'll be like, why did he put a cowboy riding a bull? When we go through the story of Jacob, you'll say, okay, now I know why he put the bull on there. But I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with that. So those are two series that you can look forward to. But let's look at Genesis 22 right now, okay? And I'm going to break this last story into 3 parts. This is perhaps one of the most well-known stories. It really goes to show you just how much of a legacy Abraham left behind. when we look at this final story about Abraham and his son here. Genesis 22, starting at verse 1. And it came to pass, after these things, that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son and clave the wood for the burnt offering and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife. And they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father? And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And we'll stop there for right now. I don't know about you, but every time I read that story, it's just tense. Every time. The tensity of the story just never gets old for me. I'm still struck with awe and amazement. You know the story all too well. You're familiar with the salvation messages behind it. I'm sure that you've heard salvation messages about this particular story, and I will share a little bit of that with us today. Maybe there are some things that you haven't considered, possibly. Maybe that you have. There are some things, when I say that, I'm not saying that I've come up with some amazing thing that no one else has ever come up with. The fact is there are things I've found that I haven't considered after all the times I've heard the story. And so I'm thinking it may be that you haven't considered it either. And so I want to share it with you. But first of all, Abraham just sent Ishmael and his mother away. He had just done that not so long ago. It was clearly the Lord's will that Ishmael go away. He was not to be a part of the free woman's gift of a son to God, and so God, it was the Lord's will. It was clear that it was the Lord's will. But in Genesis 21:11, it still says, regardless of the circumstances, and the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight. He was human because of his son, it says. We can't begin to understand this wretched story completely. And really, it is a wretched story. Some of the things that we see happening in Abraham's life. The thing I love about Abraham is that we really dig out all the skeletons out of his closet. Abraham is just one of us. It's just that he's probably the more exposed person than anybody. I mean, God just took out all the skeletons and said, look, Abraham, my friend, has the very same struggles that you do. And if you're honest with yourself and you study it, we all struggle with something in Abraham's story when dealing with his faults. But Abraham undoubtedly loved Ishmael. He loved Ishmael. It was his son. Not only this, but if you recall, Abraham planted that tree in Beersheba. Okay? Beersheba is 50 miles away from Moriah. 50 miles. It took 3 doubtless grievous, silent days to get there. We see that in verse 4. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place far off. Do you think Abraham slept? I don't think he did. I don't think Abraham slept very well. I think he was tired. I think he was emotional. I think he did not know exactly what was going on. But child sacrifices, they were a common thing during the days of Abraham. It was common. We see it throughout the Bible as well. When you see a king making his son to pass through the fire, it doesn't mean that he jumped over a fire or ran through a fire. It means that he killed his son. He offered his son up for a burnt offering. That's what that means. So whenever you see he made his son to pass through the fire, that means that son died. Kings had a lot of sons. And so it was really nothing to lose one to a certain god. It was a very common thing. It was murder, but it was a common thing. But Abraham couldn't help but think of the promise that God gave him this whole time. He couldn't help but think of how old he was. I'm sure so many thoughts crossed his mind on that 50-mile journey. Can you imagine just some of the things that he must have thought about? Is it possible Sarah could have another son? Probably grieved asking himself these questions. Is it possible? This was absurd. But Abraham knew better than to doubt God after the amazing things that he had already witnessed throughout all the time that he had been walking with God this whole time. I'm about to show you something that I think is going to really help each of us here. It's going to be a challenge of challenges. And I know that it was a challenge to me. It's something that my wife has really been trying to convince me of. I believe that Mike Barnett personally is called to be what I'm about to show you. I think that we're all called to be that, but I think that God chooses certain people. I think that he chooses certain people, gives them the opportunities. And I think it's very possible that he may be calling some of you to do the same thing that I'm about to show you. As he's walking, even though he's thinking of the blessings, the promises, he's asking, why? Why Isaac? First Ishmael, I got rid of him. I did what God wanted me to do, but now Isaac? The kid was named Laughter. He wasn't laughing now. Sometimes God does things like this. His ways are perfect, aren't they? We may not understand it. It might seem obscure. It might seem like, no, this isn't right. But his ways are still perfect. His ways are still perfect. But when you look at this story from the year 2021, all right, when you hindsight, you look back, you can see clearly just how far this went with God, what Abraham did. This went a long way with God. God was testing Abraham's faith, and really, this reinforces quite substantially what I was saying about Hagar. All right, she had Ishmael. She had been given the promise that Ishmael was going to be a nation. Why would she need God? Aren't we like that? We look at Hagar and we go, yeah, that heathen, she turned her back on God after all that God did for her, making the promise of Ishmael. And then she goes and finds a wife for Ishmael over in Egypt. How dare she? But we do that. We really do. We have to be careful about how we judge people in the Bible, because the fact of the matter is these things are written in the Bible because of struggles that we have personally. But we're like that. They say a pastor lives with a broken heart. It is true. I'll say that probably the biggest reason I live with a broken heart is the many times that I watch people put their faith in God as a pastor when they have a need, all right? Many times it has to do with a job. Lord, I need work. Lord, there's no work available. And we both agree to pray, and I make sure I tell them, now don't let this interrupt church. And what do? They fill out the application and they check Sunday because they're afraid they're not going to get that job. That breaks my heart. There are people that I have watched get revived in this church and walk with God in amazing ways, and they checked Sunday and Wednesday because they didn't trust God. And now they're not with us. And I'm not saying that happens all the time, but it's a very unwise thing to do, to eliminate any time that you can have with the brethren for money. You see what I'm saying? It's good to find time to be in church. But this would be the case with Hagar. But God wanted to know, is there anyone that would follow me, realizing what I've been to them, who would follow me regardless of the circumstances, who would follow me regardless of their losses? Is there anyone that truly believes that I am all that they need? See, the fact is we go to God and we ask him for things, but often we feel that we need those things, and that's why we turn our back on God. But God has chosen, he wants to know, is there anyone that sees that I am all that they need? That they don't need anything else? That's what he wants to know. Imagine an eternal God. He's able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we could ever ask or think. And to see people rely on merely the goods of this world, provided by the hand of God himself, but yet ignoring the hand, ignoring the provider. Imagine loving someone so much, demonstrating that love, and never getting that love reciprocated. Can I tell you something that hurts? We were talking about how we were made in the image of God. We were made inventive people, like God is inventive. We were made to depend on God the way that God depends on the Trinity. We have him. We always see God choosing the Son. We always see the Son talking about the Holy Spirit. They're always promoting each other. We see how that we're made in the image of God. You know, the fact is when we give love and demonstrate love, it hurts when it's not reciprocated. There is a cost to loving people. It really does cost to love people. Love hurts. God pays a price for love as well as we do, as well as what we do when we pay that price. God pays the price for love. Sometimes our suffering, and I want you to take this the right way, okay? I really want you to take this the right way, because I think it'll really be a blessing. But sometimes our suffering is because God wants to know, is there someone who will love me no matter what? There are times when God calls us to suffer and to see, are they going to follow me? What is it that you always say? Anyway and even if. That's what she wants on her gravestone. You know, the thing about it is that is a very difficult thing to do, to keep loving anyway and even if. But I'll tell you what, I have come to learn that, you know, when you walk with God more, you begin to exhibit that. I see that in my wife. You know, I know that she's my wife, but I see that in her, and she's helped me. But she walks with God. I know that she does. I'll testify that my wife walks with God. It's hard to be that person. It's hard to be called to be the person that's going to love God no matter what suffering, no matter what difficulties come our way. You're down on your luck all the time. Things just don't work out. It seems like you can't ever get anything in order. It just seems like one problem after another, and you can't ever seem to get out of them. But it might just be that God's looking for somebody and wants to know, is there anybody that actually loves me? It's easier said than done. You know, I could stand here all day and say, I want to be that person, but when we're actually that person, it's hard. But to be such a person is rare. It's very rare. There are so many great abilities in this world, aren't there? It's amazing some of the things that people are able to do. I don't know if you've seen some of these Olympic champions, the things that they're able to do, the speeds they're able to go, some of the inventions that men have come up with, some of the amazing speeds that humans can run, velocities of transportation, the talents. It's incredible. The musicians who can pick up any instrument and just play it as if they've been playing it all along. It really disgusts me when I see somebody pick up a mandolin. They've never played it, and they can play it. And I'm like, you've had lessons, haven't you? No. And they can play it. It's terrible. But the ability to invent and even to build aircraft that breaches times 3 the speed of sound, we've done that. The abilities that these guys had in putting this church together, I'm just amazed at the things that these guys were able to do to make this church look the way that it does. I don't possess those abilities. I see some of the things that they're able to do, and I'm like, man, I wish I was like that. I wish I could do those kinds of things. Thank goodness for YouTube. I can at least make it look like I know. But it's amazing. It's amazing that someone can correct a brain surgery. It's remarkable. A brain in surgery. It's even rare. And sure, there's a lot of brain surgeons, but there's not so many that I know anybody personally that's a brain surgeon. I'm sure that maybe there's somebody that you know that's a brain surgeon. I've never had a personal friend that was a brain surgeon. It's a rare thing. It's quite a feat. But when the Son of Man cometh, is he going to find faith on the earth? It's rare. How can it be that someone that something so simple is so commonly rejected? The gospel, putting faith in God. Why is it so rejected? I can really only put my finger on man's utter depravity. I want my sin. I really don't want God. I'll do everything I can to please God, but I don't want to surrender my life to him. That's what I can put my finger on. That sinful dead heart that has infected the entire world. The venom of the serpent, the gangrene of death. That's what I can put my finger on. But one thing is certain, when God sees a man of faith, he gets excited. Have you ever stopped to consider why God ever promised this backward nation that we're reading about in this Bible? Why he ever promised them, Israel I'm talking about, this wayward nation. Why would he promise them something like 1 man shall chase 1,000? No collateral damage. When you're in battle, 1 man's going to chase 1,000 and you're going to win. That means that there's no collateral damage in battle. That's unheard of. Why would God promise something like that to such a wayward nation? I'll tell you why. Abraham. It's because Abraham left a legacy behind. He said, that's Abraham's people right there. And when you guys are following me, I promise you, 1 man's going to chase 1,000. Have you ever wondered why to this day those knuckle-headed Palestinians are still trying to destroy Israel? They keep trying to fire these missiles over at them and destroy them, and they can't seem to do it. And they're like, well, maybe if we fire 34 more missiles, maybe it'll happen this time. It's because of Abraham. These people do not like that Isaac is the chosen one. They reject it. They say it's Ishmael. But it's not Ishmael. He's the son of a bondwoman, you see. It's all about the mother. The Jews look at it as the mother. They look at Hagar as a woman that's from Ham. They see Sarah as, no, Sarah's the chosen one. Those are the, I used to think that the Palestinians, I used to think that they were Semitic, but that's not. The Jews, they say that's an insult. They're not Semitic. They're from the tribe of Ham. And, it is a little bit proud, all right? But have you ever wondered why Israel is so hard to beat? Why it's such a tiny little nation, but it's still growing no matter what man has tried to do throughout the centuries. No matter how much they've scattered them throughout the earth, they keep coming back. It's Abraham. That's why. He left a legacy. I can promise you that when God said, take your only son and slay him on Mount Moriah, it was not an easy thing for God to say. Because he loved Abraham. But God was eager to show the world what he could do with a surrendered man. See, you might not see it in your own personal life, but the memory that you will leave behind because of the faith you put in God. You have to remember that when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Now here's the thing. When a man's ways please the Lord, even after he's dead, God keeps on living. And God makes sure that his legacy is remembered. That's why it says that his sons and his sons' sons will continue on from generation to generation. It's because that man put his faith in God no matter what. So you might not feel like a whole lot of things are happening right now. But God, when he sees your offspring, when he sees people that you've touched in your life, he says, those are the ones that I'm going to bless because of this guy right here. Because he put his faith in me. The Bible says, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. I'm going to ask you, what was Jesus thinking when he said that? What was Jesus thinking? What would make Jesus think that anybody would take up their cross and follow him? I'm going to tell you what it is, all right? Jesus was God's beloved son. Jesus had God pouring out of him. And people wanted it. I don't know if you've ever met a guy who's filled with God, but you want him to stick around. If you've ever met somebody who's filled with self, you want them to go really fast. But when they're filled with God, you want them to stay around. When you experience God for real, you'll want to take up your cross. Abraham did. I don't know if you remember, but Jesus showed up in Abraham's story one day, and he said, I am thy shield and thy what? What did he say? Thy exceeding great what? Reward. I'm your reward. See, Abraham left because he had a reward in mind, but when he met the Son of God, his reward became something different, something better, something stronger. The word of the Lord said to Abram, I am thine exceeding great reward. Do you know how God is defined? He's defined by Jesus. Jesus defines God. All right? Do you know how we can know God? Jesus. That's the way we can know God. There's no other way. The only begotten Son, which is in the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. And if you know Jesus, you know God. And this is Abraham's story. Knowing good is knowing God. When you actually know the real God, it's good. That's why it says, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. This is why Abraham went the extra mile for God. Abraham fell in love with God. I'm going to tell you something. When you're in love with God, love will make the pain worth it. It'll make the suffering worth it. He doesn't want you to just walk around going, oh, I'm suffering for Jesus. No. God says, I have chosen you to suffer, and when you put your faith in me, you will find joy, you will find peace in the midst of your suffering, so that people will see that I'm all they need. I just need one man to show this world that I'm all they need. That's all we need. Knowing good. Are you looking for what's good? Knowing good is knowing God. That's what it's all about. It's something that has to be believed by faith. But that's why he got up. And he didn't just get up to take his son. He got up early to take his son. If you love God, you're going to get up early for him. And I'm not talking about, getting up early in the morning. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you're not going to put him off. If you're one of these people who says, I'll meet with God after I get all this stuff done, but if I can't get all this stuff done, then I just don't have time for him. You don't really love God. If that's the case, but when you love God, you get up and make him first. You say, he's more important. The thing is, it's not even making sure that you put him first. You actually want to put him first because you love him. You see, you're looking forward to meeting with him first. And you know that you've got a busy day, but you've got to make sure he's first because he's that important to you. That's loving God. You don't just need him first, you want him first. That's the kind of man or woman God is looking for. I hope that men and women around me see a man. This is my desire, that men and women see a man that's so full of God, so in love with God, so full of the joy of the Lord that, I hope that struggling preachers come to me and they say, Pastor, you've been at this place for 14 years and, it just doesn't seem like a whole lot of things are happening, but you seem joyful. You seem full of God. What's the secret? There is no secret. I love God. This is where he wants me. I'm okay with that because I love God. Abraham, how can you even possibly think of taking Isaac 50 miles away to slay him? Abraham would say, because I love God. Huh? You heard me. I love God. Show me a man who loves God. And I'll tell you, that's a rare thing. It's rare. I don't know why it's rare. It's just rare. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a saint of God, you really do love God. Deep down, way past that carnal, egocentric, self-loving attitude, you, in Christ, love God. You just have to believe that you do. You have to access that by faith. 1 Peter 1:8 says, whom having not seen ye love. Or whom having not seen we love. 1 John 4:19, we love him because he first loved us. Well, I don't feel like I love him. Don't look at your feelings. The fact is, you love him. Just believe that you do, and you'll start realizing that you really do love him. You'll start feeling it. That's why he calls you his friend as well. The Bible calls us, as saints of God, friends of God. When you come to realize you actually do love God in that new spirit given to you by Jesus Christ, it will rejuvenate you. It will revive you. It will build you up. You'll be willing to give up the most precious thing on earth that you hold the dearest. You'll be willing to choose God over even your children. Is that possible? Is it possible? I could list a 1,000 different variant renditions of men like Abraham who loved their children, but they chose God. C.T. Studd, Adoniram Judson, Ann Judson, Richard Wurmbrandt gave up years. He came home after being in prison for years to see his son full grown and tall, teaching Bible study to his neighbors. When he got put in prison, he was just a little guy. He loved that boy, but he loved God more. That's just a tiny fraction of names, a smidge, Miss Betty. All right? Just a few listed of men who were like Abraham and loved God. There are so many stories. These men and women loved their children. They loved their families. But they loved God more. It is so possible. Abraham really loved Isaac, but he loved God more. That's what all this is about. He loved God more. He grew to love God more. There's proof of that. Was he excited about it? Was he excited that he was going to sacrifice Isaac? No. Of course he wasn't. But he loved God more, and he trusted God. He believed God. You see evidence of this as well. I really believe that Abraham had it in his mind. It'll be interesting to see what will happen, because this is really out of God's character. I can imagine Abraham's thinking this way. The many times that he preserved Sarah, the command to separate Ishmael from Isaac, the promise of a great nation. I guess if God wanted to, God is able of these stones to raise up children for me. Does that say that somewhere in the Bible? John the Baptist said that, didn't he? I guess if he wanted to raise up stones as children for me, I guess he could do that. No doubt this came across his mind. Basically, Abraham's mindset after all he had seen was, all things are possible with God. I've seen everything. I've seen the most amazing miracles. This is really nothing. God's able to do something. But who said this? Oh, my Father, if it be possible, remove this cup from me. Who said that? Jesus. Jesus. Was this possible? You know what? For once it wasn't possible. Why wasn't it possible with God to remove this cup? Because of love. That's what it was about. No wonder Abraham was his friend. They had something in common. Friends have a mutual bond. As much as Abraham loved Isaac, it would be impossible to let him live because love stood in the way. And as much as God loved his son, it was impossible to let him live because love stood in the way. He loved you. He loved me too much. And love sacrificed the very thing that was worth loving to save a world that was unworthy of love, but he loved us anyway. It's incredible. When you step into this realm of love, when you actually begin to understand, and really that kind of ties into our Worth It series, faith. It starts with faith, believing, hope, love. When you step into this realm of love, it makes you unstoppable. It makes you unbreakable. It makes you unchangeable. It makes you impenetrable. Love wins all because it sacrifices all and does it happily. It does it willingly. Love costs, and God counted the cost, and he paid it all. That's why your works, the things that you do to get to heaven, are going to send you straight to hell. It insults God when he sees you trying to get to heaven without his son. It insults him because he paid the ultimate sacrifice so you could get to heaven. He just wants you to know how much he loves you. The reason why faith is such a difficult thing is because the guilt that every single man on this earth knows that he has makes him feel like somehow he has to earn God's favor. He just doesn't feel like there's any possible way. It can't be that simple that God just loves us. It can't be that simple that God gave his son because he just loves us. But it says it right there in the Bible. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. They're unworthy of such love. But God says, I know you're not worthy. I know you're not worthy. But I love you nonetheless. I paid it all. It is finished. Tetelestai. But did I say it right this time? Praise the Lord. Okay, I finally got it right. Okay. You know, why are you doing? And this is an insertion of the gospel message. If you're watching online, watch the message I give at the very end of this thing. But why are you doing? God loved you enough to make the way free, paid in full. There's nothing for you to do. You have to understand that. Just accept the payment for your sin. Oh, God says this is the payment. My demonstration, the thing that I'm showing you, is because of love. My son, Jesus. You don't want to wait. You don't want to put that off. It's a gift. He's giving it to you. You're not worthy of it. Stop telling yourself that you can make yourself worthy. You never will. But he paid the price anyway. We'll look a little bit further into this story next time, all right? So let's go ahead and we'll have a word of prayer.